weekly in-depth view of agriculture up close. This is In the Field. Presented by Gordon's Feed and Pet. When we think of row crops, we typically think of planting, the growing season, and harvest in the fall. But we're here in Jasper, Missouri to learn about what takes place on the farm during the winter.
I'm a row crop farmer from Jasper, Missouri. We farm corn, wheat, double crop beans. We have a few cattle on ground that we can't row crop. I started off farming about 10 years ago with my uncle and cousin and went out on my own about 5 years ago now. We farm mainly silt loam soils, some gumbo type soils, but mainly silt loam.
So Bradley, we are in the dead of winter, and most people think of planting and growing and harvest season, but there's a lot on the farm that takes place in the wintertime prepping for that growing season. So take me back to after harvest and some of those decisions and the first steps you're taking then to prepare for the next growing season.
The decisions made in winter start even before harvest is over. Seed purchases have to be made before harvest is even over with in the fall. As soon as seed purchase, to get the biggest discounts on seed, you're always thinking about chemical for next year, and that's what we're doing right now is finalizing chemical purchases for herbicides, fungicides, insecticides that we're going to be spraying on the crops all year long. We're also doing maintenance on equipment. We're working, the combine's behind us now, we're working on replacing some parts on the combine, getting it ready to go. We're trying to get in the field for some tillage work, but it's been awful wet for us, so we haven't been able to get any tillage work done yet. So it'll all hit at one time this spring.
So let's go back to those decisions on seed and fertilizer and that nutrient management on the fields. How do you stay educated and how do you make those decisions year after year?
Chemical reps and scouts are a huge resource for knowing what to spray and what's working best in our area. So conversations with them this time of year and in the fall really line up what you're going to do as far as chemical goes. I have most of my soil grid sampled on 2.5 acre increments every 3 to 4 years to know what type of nutrients are required for the soils. We actually just got done grid sampling several acres, and they will variable rate fertilizer and lime to make sure that we are getting the nutrients that we need and not over applying and hurting the soil by over applying fertilizer and lime.
So you use the word chemical, and to many that seems like a scary word, but it's actually just nutrients added back into the soil. So kind of explain what those nutrients are and how those chemicals are applied to make sure that they're doing justice to the crop and that you're not over or under applying.
So the main chemicals we spray are insecticides, fungicides, and herbicides. Insecticides are going to help control insects and pests. Fungicides are going to help control fungus on the plants. Herbicides are going to help control weeds out in the field. We scout for everything before we spray. We don't just, oh, it's this time of year, we spray. We scout, and if it's not there, we don't spray it. We don't want to over apply for 2 reasons. It's dollars out of our pocket, but 2 is it's just not necessary to apply that chemical at that time. And so we scout our crops before we apply anything at all to them.
So one of the many pieces of machinery on the farm is the combine. Pretty useful tool when it comes to harvest. So take me through what you're doing in the winter months to prep this machinery so it's ready when you need it.
So the equipment on the farm is expensive, and we want to make sure it's going to last for a long time. And so we do maintenance in the winter times to make sure it's ready to go for the spring and make sure nothing's going to break during harvest when we need the equipment to work. So right now we're working on our combine, replacing some bearings and belts and some gears on it. Today we're working on replacing the return elevator chain and some sprockets on it.
So I didn't grow up on a row crop farm, but the machinery we worked with was hay machinery. And of course, there's nothing more frustrating than breaking down in the middle of summer when you needed to get hay up. So I know that you guys are in that same boat. You're not hauling off this equipment to a mechanic in town, you're fixing it yourself. So where do you gain that knowledge and the collection of tools and assets you need to make sure it's running?
So a lot of times it's just kind of learn as you go. You figure out something's broke and like, well, how do we get to it to fix it? I do have a service manual for most of my equipment, so if I really get stuck, I go to the service manual and figure out how to take it apart and repair it. But a lot of times it's just taking a bolt out here and a nut loose there and figuring out how it comes apart and fix it. I do have good resources with my local John Deere dealers, and so if I really get stuck, I'll call them and talk to one of the techs there. and he'll walk me through how to do something. But for the most part, it's just you start repairing it yourself. You can't, especially during harvest, repair technicians are so busy with everything that you can't rely on them to get there quickly. And so out of necessity, you learn how to do it yourself.
So this time of the year, it's time to start prepping those fields for planting. Are you there yet?
No. We've been blessed with moisture this winter.
Always a good thing.
Always a good thing, but it's been pretty wet in the fields. We should have been chiseling already, putting in hydrous on. We only have about half our hydrous on right now. We have nitrogen that we need to be putting on wheat right now that so we can't even get over because it's too wet, even with floater tires on the sprayer. So it's been a challenge, but as far as field prep goes, it'll dry out one of these days and we'll get in the field, but we should be chiseling and disking and getting ready for corn right now, and it's just too wet to be able to do that.
So you mentioned wheat, and that's winter wheat growing throughout the winter months. Where is it right now in its life cycle?
It's really just starting to grow again. We're getting some warmer days now. Mm-hmm. If it gets cold, really cold again, it could damage it because it has started to grow again already. But it's starting to grow now. We're getting ready to put nitrogen on most of it. So it can have the nutrients there it needs to start growing this spring. We will put fungicide on it probably in about 30 to 45 days if it needs it. We'll plan on harvesting it sometime June, July timeframe.
We talk a lot about the challenges and the trials and tribulations of farming. Let's look at 2019. You know, we're well into it and we're planning, already for the yields that we hope to have come fall. What is your outlook for the 2019 growing season?
My outlook for the 2019 growing season is positive. It has to be positive. If a farmer's outlook is not positive going into the spring, why is he gonna even buy seed and put it in the ground? I think that there's a lot of stuff going on right now as far as negotiations with countries that will benefit United States farmers in the long run. And so I'm hopeful that some of those get put in place, that some of the commodity prices recover to where they should be, so that we can be profitable for many years to come.